and I welcome you here to Controversial Topics Forum. I've been calling it ControForum on the podcast. This week has been shocking, to say the least. Shocking on the topic of abortion and so called women's rights. And I want to do a little forum on that, see what you think about it. But first, I thought that I might go through some of the news, just in case you weren't up on it. The first story here, maybe I'll just do a screen share. How'd that be? We'll look at South Carolina, where they're proposing to criminalize abortion, and I think that um, this comes out to counter what's going on in some other states. And I marked a place down here concerning what they are up against. Last week, Virginia's embattled Governor Ralph Northam expressed his approval of a sweeping Virginia abortion bill that would expand abortion access in the state by eliminating a 24-hour waiting period. It would also allow the procedure to take place in non hospital settings if it's performed during the second trimester and widen availability to third trimester abortions in the event that the mother's health is at risk. I think this is almost a dumbed down description of the Virginia law. And as you know, Ralph Northam is in trouble anyway right now and may have to give up his seat because of doing blackface 30 years ago. But not only Ralph, but his attorney general, the second in line, is also involved in a scandal of abusing women. And the third in line, who I can't remember the name, but is also looking to lose his place for some other infraction. So those three are Democrats, and the fourth one in line is a Republican. So they're going to fight tooth and nail to keep these guys in there. And see that this bill comes to pass while at the same time the South Carolina lawmakers are going to try to criminalize it, which, in my opinion, should have been criminalized a long time ago. I don't know if you, well, certainly you know people that have had abortions and have mentioned that to you, and how for these women it follows them their whole lives. In fact, those that have done this that I've talked to who have regretted it and have lived with this sin on their heart all these years. Well, just like the guy doing blackface 40 years ago, how can you punish somebody for something that they did as a youth, or something that they foolishly fulfilled through the pressure of their parents? When I was 17, I had a friend whose girlfriend got pregnant, and he took her to New York for an abortion. She was about 15. And that was a shock to my system at the time. I just couldn't believe that my friend would do such a thing. And of course, the girl was underage. So I thought, what damage is this going to do to her young life and throughout her life? Well, of course, that's something you don't talk about with people unless you know them very well or unless they bring it up to you. And we go to Virginia now. Let's see. Oh, I got to get my Zoom thing out of the way here. My understanding of this New York law was that a woman could have an abortion right up and even past the time of birth. There was an example of this I saw on the internet yesterday where they had brought a child out live and healthy and used some type of a spike in the back of the head to kill that baby. You probably know more about this than I, but here's a shocking statistic. The New York State Department of Health tells us there were 285,000 induced abortions between 2012 and 2014. The number of live births for the same year was 237,000. There were 50,000 more abortions than there were live births. Who would have thought that the people of New York or United States would consider this something that they could do in their leisure? And the other thing that's shocking is that other states are wanting to do this as well. Of course, California, Washington, and Oregon, all very liberal states, if you can call that liberality. And it's amazing how this all came out at one time. And in Vermont, the headline is right to abortion bills goes even further than New York's, that a fetus, so called, shall not have independent rights. And in practicality, what this means is that animals have more rights than an unborn child. You're going to go to jail if you kill a dog and anybody finds out. But if you kill a child, even at the cusp of being born, then you're legally protected. Every individual who becomes pregnant has the fundamental right to choose to carry a pregnancy to term, give birth to a child, or to have an abortion, reads the bill. A fertilized egg, embryo, or fetus, we should add in there a baby, because earlier on they say give birth to a child shall not have independent rights under Vermont law. "14 years ago, we thought that a hero had been sent up to the Supreme Court, Justice Roberts. We were quite surprised on his vote on Obamacare, if you remember. And here's a little bit from the New York Times, one of the most conservative newspapers in our country. Chief Justice John G. Robert Jr.'s confirmation hearings 14 years ago, the first dozen questions were about whether he would respect the Supreme Court's abortion proceedings. He was still answering those questions Thursday night. In a surprise move, the Chief Justice joined the Supreme Court's liberal wing, again, in a 5-4 decision blocking a Louisiana law that could have severely restricted abortion in the state. Although he offered no reason for his vote, there's little doubt that he wanted to avoid sending the message that the court was ready to discard a 2016 decision, a precedent, in which it struck down a similar Texas law. But the court's order was just 3 sentences long, and the stay it imposed was temporary, the case is likely to reach the court on its merits next term, and when it happens, it's hardly certain that Chief Justice Roberts will vote to strike down the Louisiana law. It seemed a little hasty to me that when Roberts was appointed, he was not only appointed to the court, but also as the president of the court as well. It seems inconsistency is the result of competing impulses. Chief Justice Roberts is a product of the conservative legal movement, and his general approach is to lean right, but he's also an institutionalist and a guardian of his court's legitimacy, meaning he wants to make modest and deliberate moves. What comes out of this in the end is anybody's guess. I think this is what's been happening this last week is going to be motivating and catalyzing for some kind of major event on this particular topic. It lingering on now since 1970, and the court's moving to become more conservative. We would think that this would have more gravity than it does. So with that said, let's see what you have to say about this little overview and maybe where you stand on this. Yes, we want some opinion here. Don't tell me that this is not an emotionally charged issue and that you're not regurgitating this inside, internally terrorized by this kind of thing. And of course, we have Bishop Ergash who's going to step right up. Go ahead, brother.
I think, I've been observing the whole situation, starting with New York, and then you have over there in California, you had that situation that went on there as well. I think we have to look at the spiritual implications of what's happening. And these bills are an outflow of the things that we have permitted. It doesn't matter whether it's in the body, out of the body, but we've allowed certain things to go on in this country. First thing we did is we legalized the ability of homosexual rights. And, I knew that when that happened, that abortion was going to be hot on its heels. It's going to be a fight, however, because what the Democratic leadership is hoping is that we will do exactly what we'll do. We'll get in our little conclaves, our enclaves, and we'll complain about it. We'll whine about it. And as long as we don't do anything about it, then like the Democratic leadership is fine with that. I mean, they're like, okay, you could be against it. You can disagree with it, but don't open your mouth. Because if you open your mouth, we're going to put you in jail. If you open your mouth, we're going to make life hard for you. People are being threatened in this country, in the United States of America, almost like they were being threatened in Nazi Germany in 1933.
Absolutely.
The same exact way, the same exact things are going on. And the question that should be asked is, where is the body on this? I know that the Christian church has been out there with Operation Rescue and other organizations, Tennessee Right to Life, and things of that nature, and they've done their due diligence. But here's the question that should be asked. We who are of light, we who have the truth, we who have the Torah, have done virtually nothing in regards to this. We, like I said, we'll come together on the Shabbat. We'll talk about the Torah. We'll talk about doctrine, but we won't deal with issues like abortion, sex trafficking. We won't deal with the drug abuse going on in our country right now via the opioid crisis. We won't deal with these things. Where are we on this, and where do we go from here? And that's my question to everybody on the panel is, what do you see? How do we fix it? And in order to fix it, where do we start?
I think one of the problems that we have had down through these years, those of us who have been active in the Right to Life movement, is that people who aren't religious are somewhat stigmatized by the fact that religious people are backing the Right to Life movement. And we are receiving almost a double whammy from the other side in propaganda. That is, first of all, well, they're Christians or something like that, which makes them ignorant fools. And second of all, right to life, spoken of in general terms, is an outcropping not of the American people, but of a subset, religious people. And you don't want to identify with them. I've been doing an experiment the last couple of months and looking at liberal news every single day on my phone. And what I'm finding is so much denigration of religious people, especially Jews. I mean, I go through probably 30 articles a day, and I'll say probably 3 to 4 of those articles are about Jews, one aspect or another of their lives, and they're all denigrating. And there'll be a couple of more that are against believers of any kind. If they find even the smallest infraction a believer has done, they're going to sensationalize that for us. And then numerous other articles about primarily homosexual rights. And I read these articles, and what the authors are doing is attempting to make this kind of life, and now especially people that are going transgender, to be not only a common occurrence, but something we ought to consider doing with our children. And in the last week, at least 3 or 4 articles about people who are raising children gender neutral. In one case, having sex surgery on a pre-adolescent, which is insane. I wonder where the ethical vision of Americans can be if indeed this is the mainstream, and they are so for abortion rights, and they're so for gender neutrality, so they say, and they're pushing transgender issues almost in your face all the time. This is propaganda, and people believe it. People don't want to be in with the out crowd. Comments?
And also, Jack, just to piggyback on that, when you say this stuff is in our face, I mean, you go to Disney World and they have Gay Day at Disney World, and they smooching and carrying on right there in public. What's the goal? The goal is to put that stuff in your face to where you are forced to have a discussion with your children about that issue. Now, here's the thing. Why is that happening to us? That's happening to us because for some reason or another, we have stopped pushing back. The believer has stopped pushing back. The conservative has stopped pushing back. Why? It's because there is a level of timidity
Mm.
that has settled into our ranks in the general body, that has settled into our ranks in the leadership, and has settled into our ranks as a nation. And so because of that, we think that, oh, if I just mind my business, it will go away. Guess what, folks? It ain't going away. Just like Hitler in 1923, he didn't go away. Hitler in 1933, he didn't go. Hitler didn't go away. 1939, he didn't go away. 1941 was the conference at Wannsee. It didn't go away. And as a result, some people say 6 million Jewish people were murdered. I contend that was closer to 10 million Jews. 9 to 10 million Jews were massacred. Okay. And I have different historical findings that can prove that, especially as they're starting to uncover more and more documents and evidence. So the point being is that when you do nothing, I think it was Rich Cook that said it last week, we need to ask ourselves, are we okay with this stuff? Are we okay with homosexuals roaming to and fro, seeking whom they may devour? Are we okay with people murdering children? Are we okay with this stuff? If we're okay, the silent majority does nothing. You know, go ahead, Jack. I'm sorry.
Oh, anybody else before
Yeah, I'd like to offer up a thought that talk about pushing back, and it seems like we stopped pushing back. Well, there's still pro-life groups out there. They're pushing back. There's more than ever before. There's still politicians out there pushing back. We have the President of the United States in the State of the Union condemning the new law and basically trying to, get people to see the truth to overchange that law, because that's just not right. So we have the President of the United States on the biggest platform imaginable, in front of the entire world, condemning this practice, yet the people still want it. So, we can't push, is what I'm seeing, is that even when the President of the United States says don't do these things, the people still vote for it because it's a majority. And we're told that the majority will go by the broad path. So, in our effort to push back, I see it as prayer, to talking to the individuals, sharing the truth with them, sharing it with the women, sharing it with, anyone that will listen. And that is our pushing back. And like God said to Abraham, that for the sake of just 10 righteous, he would spare Sodom and Gomorrah. Do we have 10 righteous in America? Is America even what we should be focusing our efforts on? Or should it be, the kingdom of God, the citizens of the kingdom that is not of this world, that are a set apart people? Because the world nowadays, in America particularly, is all about this all-inclusiveness. And God is not about this all-inclusiveness. Yes, all can come to his way, and all can be accepted, and the stranger can be treated as the native born. But by necessity and by definition, his people are set apart. It's not all-inclusive. And so America has accepted this all-inclusive idea, and they don't want to let go of it. And I don't see them letting go of it because the majority will walk by the broad path. So I just wanted to offer up that thought, not saying that shouldn't get involved in certain ways, whatever way you feel led to by the Spirit, but that, the way the world tries to change things shouldn't be the way we try to change things. They want to do it through politics and passing laws and stuff. Whereas, we don't need to legislate a law to say it's wrong to kill, because God's already legislated it. It is wrong. And, if we get, I don't know, that's all I need to say on that.
Desmond, there's something deeper that you hit upon here, and that is the attitude of many believers, that because they're in the kingdom and not of this world, they should have nothing to do with what goes on in this world. They don't vote. They don't take part in any kind of public demonstration. And of course, just watching this on Facebook to see what some believers have to say about this, they just simply will not take any action. And I would suppose that would also have to do with prayer, because they think that they're not to be a part of a governmental system or shaping the public environment. And I hear this a lot, that you can't legislate morality, which is a blatant lie. You certainly can, and we are, we have legislated morality in New York and these other states.
Exactly.
Okay.
Jack, let me get something in there to go to Desmond's point. Allow me to point you to the Nazarene Acts. In the Nazarene Acts, there is a confrontation at the temple with regards to the behavior of the leadership as it regards to Yahshua and Yahshua's role as Moshiach. And the high priest was there, and his people, our early forefathers were there with their people. They were in the streets, on the steps of the temple, confronting the Kohen Gadol and that leadership about their behavior. And they had what we would call a midrash. They had a midrash about this, a midrash. And they were in the face of the leadership, and the leadership was in their face. And it shows that, quite frankly, if we are going to be, Yeshua said it, I pray that you don't take them out of the world. I pray that you leave them in the world. This is why we're here, because we're sanctifying the earth. If we do nothing, Rich Cook showed us on last week, Matthew chapter 25. Yeah. Think about it. Those people that are going to go away into darkness and everlasting punishment, that's us. If we don't do what the Father put us here to do, and I believe is to resist all evil, to help to bring about the amelioration of all creation, we are going to be punished as people who were giving gifts and callings and talents and did not use them to stand up against wickedness. That's our job, to stand up against this wickedness, this evil. And if that means, I joined the Tennessee Right to Life this week as a result of our conversation that we had last week. I called them up Monday morning and say, listen, I'm a local pastor here in Cleveland, Tennessee. How do I get involved? How do I help?
Yeah.
And that's where we need to get to. We need to get up off of our blessed assurances and go and find out how to get involved and where to get involved. You don't even have to take the abortion issue. Take homelessness. These are things that Yeshua said that we're supposed to do. We're supposed to defend the widow and the orphan, defend the fatherless, defend those that can't defend themselves, ameliorate all creation while staying unspotted from the world. So that is a commandment right there for us to get out and find ways to alleviate suffering in this world.
I get exactly what you're saying. I think those ways, though, should be spiritual ways. For instance, let's look at Matthew 5:39.
Actually, I disagree with you, Desmond, because you live here. Everything in the spiritual it shows itself in the physical.
Right, I totally understand, but you're talking about resisting evil. Well, Matthew 5:39 says, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. So it seems to be what he's saying is, don't resist an evil person. If he goes to slap you on the face, turn the cheek to the other face. As in, you don't grab his hand or beat him up or physically stop him in this world from doing the wrongs in this world. Let the righteous be righteous and the evil still be evil, and the clean be clean and the filthy still be filthy. They can do that. If they choose to do that, they can do that. But I see the evil that we're resisting is within our own selves. And, if we're walking according to God's will, then we're not going to, do things like commit abortion or teach others to do so. In fact, we're going to do like Jesus said, to be great in the kingdom, to do and observe all these commandments and to teach them to others. So I see that is us standing up, that is us pushing back, that is us resisting the evil within our own selves. and within others that we speak it to so they can hear the truth. And, the light can, shine out that darkness that's in them. And I just don't see these physical acts as politics and things like that as a means of effective pushing back. It's like, we're using a sword instead of the word, which should act as our sword. So yes, get up and tell everybody the truth. But to get on a political stage or try to do something like that, I just think it's futile because of the whole nature of the world, that the majority rules. That's what democracy is. And, you were talking about going up to the leaders of the synagogues and the leaders of the Jewish people and pushing back against that kind of stuff. Well, that was the leaders of their people. That was the spiritual leaders, the Pharisees and whatnot. They were the ones that were leading God's people, and they were leading them in spiritual matters. So, I mean, if you want to take the state and religion and put them back together, then I'm like, all right, there we go. Now we're on to something, get back to God's ways where, his ways are instituted in the state. Like his laws are the laws of the land. So, I mean, if we're not getting to that, then we're just, shaking hands with the world and becoming friends with the world. Even though it seems like we're pushing back, we're trying to push this law. I don't really, have too much insight on this. I just see a fundamental flaw in trying to get the majority to vote with you when they're not going to.
That passage in Matthew needs to be rightly interpreted. There's a much deeper meaning to the hand slapping, and we call it the third way. We've studied it here in the Yahad, and I would suggest that if anybody feels that that is a matter of weakness or nonviolence on the behalf of Yahshua, that they listen to our teaching on the third way. You all know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I remember it. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember it.
You can interpret that in a more contextual way that really tells us how his action is not a matter of drawing back from evil, but addressing evil. I'll go get that teaching and put it up because it's a very important one to listen to in regards to the Beatitudes and the rest of the Sermon on the Mount. Would you like to take 7 minutes and listen to Senator Lankford?
Actually, yes, but it's one small thing I'd like to chime in. Then we could do that.
All right.
And it's terminology here. Yeshua also told us to occupy until he comes. And if you look at that word occupy, go and look up your definitions and find out what does it mean to occupy. That's a military term. That means when you go into a place, you have to fight. You have to set rules. You set ground rules and things of that nature. So to occupy is a physical term. You're physically occupying a space. You're physically occupying a land or whatever. But it's something that we need to think about. When we sit by and do nothing, are we really occupying?
Jackson, I have a couple things I'd like to add here too, I guess. The Second Chronicles, I think it's Second Chronicles 7:14. This thing about when my people will acknowledge their ways and it's a matter of us, kind of beginning in this healing thing, as opposed to, obviously it's the liberals are causing all the problems. That's given in the context of, Solomon's prayer for the temple, commissioning the temple. And what had happened there is Solomon is basically saying when the people pray towards this place, then heal their land, forgive, and so he added that as part of the blessings and curses of the Torah. And so this idea of us returning to the law, look at in Exodus, it talks about how when two men are fighting and accidentally hit a woman, and there's damage to the unborn, This is where the eye for eye and tooth for tooth thing comes from. I was recently doing an internet search under for 10 Commandments monuments. And there's, of course, a lot of news where it shows the 10 Commandments getting pulled out of the courthouses. But if you Google on Google image search 10 Commandments courthouses versus 10 Commandments church, you'll find far more of them in front of the courthouses.
Yeah.
So you've got a whole system, a whole country here where, well, they want the cross on the church, and they want nothing to do with the 10. And so when we get into this concept of governance, it says in the New Testament, let those of measly capacity, get involved with judging. And this is something that, the church has absolved itself, the institution ones of getting involved with definition of that which is moral. You said earlier that you can't legislate morality. Well, legislation is an expression of morality, ideally. And, we're so far, along and down the path there that, our origins, our foundings, some of this stuff is rooted 100 years ago in these bad turns, bad directions. And so, we're very much in the thick of it. And, until we, start to acknowledge our, between obligation and the Torah on these things, I think it's only going to get worse. And, we might be already at a precipice of no return, in a lot of ways.
Might be. Andy, I think that you hit the nail right on the head there.
Why don't we start our own nation?
We don't do anything. That's the problem.
Well, why don't we start our own nation and we'll legislate our own laws, and people who want to be part of the world can be part of the world, and people who want to be
because you'd kill yourself within a year. All you got to do is just look at the Messianic and Hebrew roots communities. They did the very same thing, and look at where they're at right now.
Well, isn't that what we're trying to do through America?
Huh?
Isn't that what we're trying to do? I mean, technically, by trying to change the laws and this and that, we're trying to turn America into the nation of God.
Well, America, see, to me, America is a nation of Yahweh. We just got to get out there and contend for it. See, I think what happened to us is we've got so used to getting things handed to us, we don't want to work for anything. We don't want to fight for nothing. That's this generation. But I'm going to tell you something. My parents and my grandparents, they got out there, and after World War I, my granddad fought in World War I. My father fought in World War II. They came back, and they began to fight for something, and they achieved it. And so we got to fight. We got to fight until we die, if that means we die.
I think another thing is that we've been brainwashed into thinking that we aren't in the majority.
Yeah.
The media has told us that we're useless, we're idiots, we don't know how to do anything, we're wrong, and we bought it, hook, line, and sinker. Stop listening to the news, get out and do what's right.
Well, I think another issue is, are we actually in the minority? The polls, there are some things I look at, they say, well, poll taken to so many people and says this, and I'm like, really, you believe that the majority of Americans actually think this? Whatever this is. It could be about economic policies, it could be about abortion, it could be about the best drink or something like that. And you're like, where do these people get these poll results? Who are they asking?
Well, does the majority of America think that abortion should be legal?
I would probably, I think that, again, it depends on who you ask. You can, math can be made, as you're an engineer, so you know a little something about this, that math can be made to say almost anything you want it to say. And it's who has control of the organs of the news media. And as Allison said, there is something to that they will say what they want you to hear. While I listen to the news, I don't believe everything I hear or take it all hook, line, and sinker, because, you would not be a believer in God if you did. You just say, there's no point to this. Let's just go out and, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we shall surely die.
I think that that's the attitude, Governor Yochanan. I'm thinking, you look at the Christian church in general, the evangelical church, they're just waiting. They're waiting to fly off. They're not, they think we're not going to be a part of a tribulation, but the tribulation is all around us now.
Well, I think you're getting into something. I know that Marcial is strong on this particular issue, that, you know, that the waiting around or the rapture mentality is basically what it is. It says that I won't have to worry about anything that goes on here soon. It's any minute. And it's amazing to see how this works out. I've visited a couple sites in the past, and I used to be fans of these sites, Rapture Ready and other sites like it, and they're trying to figure out when it's going to happen. And it's like, how long, you know, what happens when you figure out it doesn't, or will they ever figure out that it doesn't until it, you know, he returns and the signs didn't line up the way they thought they should,
or that it already happened.
Well, yeah, I'm not taking I'm not putting aside the
Sure.
the revelation, at least a lot of it or most of it or whatever has happened. But I'm just saying these people are literally thinking that the rapture is going to happen any minute now, and they're going to go away, and something like Left Behind is going to take place. And the Jews are going to be left behind, and everybody else to deal with it. Cars are going to crash and go out of control. Planes are going to fall out of the sky. I mean, it's great fiction, the Left Behind books. I read them all. Well, the 12 original ones, all of them, and enjoyed the fiction. But you know, when you're a child, you think as a child. And we all need to grow up a little bit. Those who have that mentality need to grow up.
Well, I'm going to ask, is this nation that we're in, America, is it a nation under God? I know that's what it says, but is it? You know, which God is it? Is it the God that allows abortion? Is it the God that starts wars with other countries when they've done nothing to us? Is it, you know, I mean, take your pick from the things that America as a whole has voted for and done wrong, you know, against the Lord himself and or against, you know, Yahweh and against, you know, fellow mankind. You know, it doesn't look like a nation of God. It has completely different laws than God's kingdom. It has people and politicians in the head of certain things making rules and judges that, you know, don't pay any heed to God's word.
But whose fault is that, though? Whose fault is that? That's our fault.
Well, I mean, you can't blame us for what the majority. Yeah.
Absolutely, you can. Absolutely, because see, this is our country. You know, the Father, for whatever good or ill, Yahweh allowed us to be born in a nation and in a time such as this. Okay, if He did that, then it's our responsibility, this generation's responsibility, to see to it that we are a godly nation. When they took prayer out of school, everybody stayed quiet. When Roe v. Wade happened, everybody stood quiet. When other things went on, we all as believers stayed quiet. So who do you think Yahweh is going to look to when it comes time to judge nations? Because nations are going to be judged. And by the way, what nation has not done those things that you're talking about?
Well, you have free will. You don't have to be a citizen of this nation. You can move to another nation and you can be a citizen of another nation. I mean, we see examples of this all throughout the scriptures. I mean, who was Moses, you know, born to and grew up in Pharaoh's house? And you have, you know, Egyptians that left the Egyptian nation and went to go be with the Hebrews and left, you know, their country to go be with God's people and follow God. So I'm like, just because we're born here, it doesn't, you know, make us a citizen of this nation. It makes us a citizen when we vote in its politics, when we take part in its ways, when we, you know, get up in the nation and try to be a part of the nation. And I think it's, you know, not right to try to change another nation from the inside out, because first you have to assimilate yourself into another nation in order to change them from the inside out. You have to become one of them in order to be one of them and get a say in their vote. But since we're not nations, or we're not citizens of this world, we're citizens of a kingdom not of this world, then why would we vote in another world's, politics? We're citizens of the kingdom of God, and in the kingdom of God we don't vote at all. God appoints the leaders and rulers, and he says that he can put a ruler in and he can take a ruler out. I mean, whether or not we vote for a ruler, God can take them in and pull them out. And it seems like prayer has more effect on that than our votes do. And, if he wants to take this nation down, he could take it down tomorrow. If he wants to bless it, he can bless it tomorrow, all regardless of what the people of America, vote for. If there's just 10 people righteous in that nation, they'll stay.
Right. I see what you're saying, Des. I see what you're saying, but think about it. Your body, which is the temple of the Almighty, does more to make this nation righteous. And that means, I'm not saying you got to go out there and vote and do all that other stuff, but there are other things that say if you don't feel comfortable voting, but there are things that you can do. Okay? You may choose to feed the homeless. You may choose to minister to battered women or battered children or foster children. There are things that we as believers can be doing. That's all I'm saying, is that, yes, we thump around scripture like a sword. But if you go and ask them to go out and take somebody into your house and build that person up, we are loath to do these things. We as believers are not doing these things. We sit in our little enclaves and we whine about the conditions of the world. We whine about the conditions of the country, but we are not doing anything about it. And we are the people that Yahweh is going to judge.
Well, I would disagree with that. I would say we are doing these things.
How?
Well, let's take, for instance, me. There was a lady in my wife's sister's church who didn't have any money. She's like 60-something years old, and she didn't have enough money for a place to stay or whatever. So I brought her to my house, and I set her up with a room. I gave her 9 months free of rent. She could just live there to get back on her feet. And every day she was here, I preached the word to her. I mean,
you're a saint.
Did she? I'm not saying I'm good or anything for that. It's just my, it's just my due. It's just,
Well, I want to. I'll just interrupt here because of the time. And Rich Cook's vision for this particular forum and the ones following this, where we'll take up other such topics, is that we find a way to do something to ameliorate this problem in creation, to actually do something that's going to be effective. Now, he couldn't get here today, unfortunately, but that was his desire in the first place. And that's what we desire too as a Yahad. We're activists. We have to take an active part. And I know that Elohim sends people along to us, even if they are in their 60s, even if they are in their 60s, poor decrepit people in their 60s, probably with white hair. But those people we have to take care of because we've been told to. This is a corporate evil that we need to find a way to address. We want to be done with talking. We want to find a way to effectively address this outside of even giving money. That's giving money is just an excuse. But I want to go now, while we have some time left, over to this senator and see what he has to say about infanticide. All right, so maybe we can put the rest of the discussion on a little different plane. Okay? I'm not trying to offend anybody. I guess maybe I was just offended. Can you see him? Let me see. Stop share. Share computer sound. There we go. Us people in our 60s, we have trouble with these technology issues here.
The Senate often does things by unanimous consent, areas where there's really no common disagreement. This body will do a unanimous consent to congratulate the New England Patriots for winning the Super Bowl. And unanimously, all of us will agree to congratulate them. But today, the senator from Nebraska brought up a very straightforward, simple bill. Do we as a nation permit infanticide? For some reason, the New England Patriots is non-controversial, but the death of children at their delivery is controversial enough that my Democratic colleagues are blocking it. Now, it's not some fancy formal bill with a trick piece into it. It's a very simple, straightforward bill. Occasionally, an abortion is botched, and while they're actually trying to take the life of a child, the child is actually delivered. At that moment, the child is delivered and is on the table crying, and the question is, now what do we do? Current medical practice is back away from the child and allow them to die slowly on the table because they were supposed to have been an abortion, though the child was fully delivered and is on the table, umbilical cord attached, crying. This doesn't seem like this should be controversial. This seems like this should be as straightforward as congratulating the Patriots for winning the Super Bowl. How can we as Americans say no to a fully delivered child's life? The question about abortion has been historically a question about when does life begin. I'm one of those crazy radicals that actually believes in science. And I think when cell division is occurring and DNA is there that's different than the mom and different than the dad, that's actually a different human being. A smaller human being, but a different human being. That's what everyone in science believes. That child that's developing is alive. Their day of their birth is just another day. Now, it's a pretty traumatic day for them to be able to transition from in the womb to outside, but birth is just another day in life for that child because they're fully developing. They were developing in the womb, they're developing outside the womb. Every single person that can hear this has had the exact same experience of developing in the womb. This seemed like this was a common sense issue until the state of New York a few weeks ago stood and cheered and applauded when they passed a bill for third trimester abortions. This is ultra late term abortions. This is a fully viable child abortions. Now, let me just review real quick on what the state of New York did. There are only 4 countries in the world that allow late term abortions. Only 4 left. North Korea, China, Vietnam, and the United States. And New York legislature stood and cheered that they're in the middle of the human rights depraved nations of China, North Korea, and Vietnam. That's at 24 weeks and on. At 20 weeks, there's still left Canada and the Netherlands and Singapore. But by 24 weeks, at that late term, Canada, the Netherlands, and Singapore, they drop off. They're like, no, we're out. That's a fully viable child. But New York legislature stood and applauded. And then it got one-upped in Virginia last week, as the governor of Virginia explained their late-term abortion bill as one-upping New York, saying in their bill, in his words, this is how it would work. If a child has deformities, however that's defined, or for the mental or physical health, however they want to define that, with any loose, because there was no definition, they would deliver the child, make them comfortable, resuscitate the child if the mother wanted, and then they would discuss what to do with the child. So it's not enough for the state of New York to applaud late-term abortions and joining North Korea, China, and Vietnam as the only place on earth that allows this. No, Virginia Democrats had to go one more. and say, let's deliver the child and then discuss it based on their deformities. Back to the Super Bowl conversation, one of the most popular commercials in the Super Bowl was for a gaming system showing kids with disabilities playing a video game just like other kids. Except now they want to decide at that child's birth whether to just take that life then. How in the world can we as a culture run a television commercial and say that kid is just like that kid? Look, they play games just alike. But when they're little, let's deliver them and discuss it and figure out what we want to do. This is infanticide. This is not about pro-life and pro-choice. This is pro-humanity. To get to the point that we're discussing whether a child lives or dies based on what they look like at birth. And if they don't quite look right, then we'll take that life. Is inhumane and is beneath us as a society. And I cannot fathom a discussion that we're having on the floor of the United States Senate where a fully delivered child, we're going to discuss whether they're going to live or die. Or a botched abortion where a child is fully delivered, that we're going to discuss what happens. It used to be, my Democratic colleagues said life begins at birth. Now apparently it's not at birth anymore. It's unknown when life actually begins.
Well, I think Lankford really spelled it out there. This is a matter of infanticide. These states are lining up with some of the most depraved nations in the world. And on top of that, to find out there were more abortions than live births by 50,000 in, was it New York? The last couple of years, it's, you know, how can you not do anything? How can you just resort to prayer without action?
Yeah. One thing, Jack, is somebody brought up in the chat, this is exactly like allowing children who are sacrificed to Moloch and Dagon, because they're pretty much with the same thing. And it's the exact same thing. And as I said, we as a nation will be punished if we stand by and don't do anything. I said it before. Matthew 25 is to the believer, not the world. And it's the believer who will be disinherited if we allow things like that to happen.
Now, let me just mention to you that Lankford here, would he have done better if he just spent that time in prayer? Or
Yeah, can I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say to that too, that I think that we're talking about, and Rich brought it up last week, that we're tired of talking about it. We're tired of that, whining about it. We want to take action. But, and I totally, completely agree with that and think that should be our mission and our focus. However, donating money to organizations that already have boots on the ground, that have a record, that have a voice in Congress, that have the president's ear, that whatever, is not an excuse. It's important and it makes a difference. Second thing is rhetoric makes a difference. That was just a speech, but that's what changes people's minds. If we remember Uncle Tom's Cabin, a novel that was just written by, Harriet Beecher Stowe, just a novel. It was the catalyst for the Civil War. So, being educated and talking and having influence while at the same time finding out what we can do to take action. The whole package is something that's going to make a difference. That's part of our role as believers. We're not here to camp out and to say this is the devil's world and that the kingdom is somewhere out in outer space. It's not. It started here. And I just wanted to see that specific example in that speech that senator gave.
Yay, Marcille. She comes through again.
Hey, Marcio, and maybe Lee, you might remember this. That there was a song that we used to sing, and it talking about going to the enemy's camp and taking back what the devil stole from you. And I think that's what we kind of have to do, is to go back and just take things back from the enemy. He's a liar and the father of lies. So here's what I've done. Just some of the things that I've done to kind of get the discussion going on. Okay, what's the plan now? What do we do next? Okay, we whined, we've kvetched, we've complained about it. Okay, so what do we do? Here's what we're doing over here. We, as I told you on Monday, we joined the Tennessee Right to Life. So if you see a big fat guy out there holding a sign in front of an abortion clinic, that's going to be me. I'm going to try to get involved with the homeless coalition here in town to try to figure out what we can do to help to combat homelessness. I'm going to also be talking with the ministerial alliance here. I'm going to get involved with that, because as ministers, you can get involved with the ministerial alliances in your community. And we're going to be taking on some issues here in the Chattanooga, Cleveland area, the greater Chattanooga area. We'll be taking on those issues. Also, I want to use that as a platform to look in the face of some of the African-American clergy and ask them why they are supporting a Democratic majority in the House who support abortion, and talk with them. I'm going to get on my podcast somebody from the Tennessee Right to Life organization, and we want to talk about how abortion is decimating minority communities, because that's the reason behind abortion. If you look at it, it's to get these poor African Americans, Hispanics, and people who are not of means to kill their children. And so that's some of the stuff that we're doing. What have you guys thought about? How do you guys want to get involved?
Well, this is a question that we need to identify and answer in the next few sessions, because we want to go on from here to child trafficking, for instance, and some of these other desperate moral issues that we're facing. So our time is up, unfortunately, but we shall come back at it again next week. And perhaps in the meantime, some will want to go and look a little more into study and help us out here with this discussion. Rich will again be gone next week, which is unfortunate, but he'll be listening in on the podcast. And I really appreciate you all taking part in this. And I'm sorry if I got out of line today. It happens with me once in a while. And when a person gets old, they get grumpy. So, Governor, did you have something to say?
I was going to say just that I think, rhetoric is one of the things that we need to probably perfect, because we underestimate the power of speech.
Yes.
The power of not just the sound of somebody's voice, but what they're saying and how that can make an impact. I mean, we talked about Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel, but then there is also, was it Jonathan Swift? I think A Modest Proposal? Instead of, they had a famine in Ireland, and he said, well, why don't we just eat the kids? That'll solve the problem. It was very cutting. The point was, of course, to get the attention of the English landlords. And I think he did.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So we'll see you again next Shabbat at 1:00, and I can make this chat available to you if you like. I'm going to put this up on YouTube, and I will put a link up to the chat as well. Okay? Thank you again. Yahweh be with you all.